Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be discussing how sports content providers can benefit from data-driven strategies. And I think that bit's key, really. It's data-driven strategies. I think the industry has largely adopted content-based strategies in the past. So I'm quite delighted, really, to be joined by Jimenez from Inter Miami, Alex Gough from Professional Squash Association, and Luke Gaydon from Accedo to talk about this topic today. I think we're going to be able to provide a unique view of the sector and a well-rounded view, really, as we've got federations, clubs, vendors here to talk about the topics today. So maybe we could just go around and introduce yourselves first. Alex, start with you.
Yeah, thanks. So it's Alex Gough. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Professional Squash Association. We run the PSA World Tour. I've been in this role for about 10, 11 years now, ex-player myself. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Alex. Gene?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Jimenez. I'm a VP of Digital Content and Broadcast for Inter Miami. I gotta say that, you gotta love what you do. I would do my job if it was for free. Just don't tell my boss.
Very good. Mum's the word. Luke, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Also, thank you very much for having me here. My name's Luke Gaydon. I head up business development for Accedo's sports vertical. We've been helping rights holders and broadcasters in the sports space develop OTT strategies, launch direct-to-consumer services for a number of years now, latterly focusing very much on this question of how you can harness data to really power a transformative user experience. So excited to hear what the rest of the panelists have to say on this.
Brilliant, thanks. And I just want to say, for the audience's benefit, there is a chat function there. Feel free to ask a question, raise your hand, or jump into the Slack channel and ask a question there. We'll address those questions at the end of the session, or if you feel like more comfortable to ask questions privately, then that's cool as well, and we can pick those up in due course. Also, everyone will get access to the recording of this webinar after the session, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. And we look forward to receiving any feedback from you guys as well. So look, it is a panel around sports and data-driven strategies, and I'm delighted to jump in with 2 feet into those topics shortly. But I think we're living in mad times, should we say, in this global pandemic. And given that we have a federation and a club here with us today, I think it would make sense to at least address COVID, the elephant in the room, initially. So Jean, we spoke this morning actually, and I believe you're on your way to the training ground to get a COVID test every 48 hours just for BAU. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how the MLS is managing the pandemic?
Look, I think it was a curse and a blessing at the same time. Not every year you get to start the season 3 times. And I think that was an amazing opportunity. But, in all honesty, COVID has changed the way that we do business. It has changed the way that people consume content, and the way that we are, we look at our safety measurements for ourselves and our fans, as a sports entity. For us, it was really hard because we were, I would say 40 hours before our kickoff, our first, home opener, and everything was canceled. And I think it was a very humbling experience. I think the league has done an amazing job in creating bubbles that allowed for MLS's back to return and start playing. They have been amazing in documenting and being connected with the CDC and all government entities and making sure that we create those bubbles also remotely in every single territory or local territory for a club. Our teams go from a bubble in the training facility to a bubble in the stadium to a bubble in the bus, a bubble in the plane, a bubble when they arrive in the other visiting team. And I think it's been, an amazing, ride. The only thing that I really, I'd say, would take differently is having no fans in the venue. There is no football without fans. And I think everyone saw that when Bundesliga first started. It was just an eerie feeling of, what is this? Is this a training game, or is it really football? But I think little by little we're improving in our approach to be safe.
Well, okay. Yeah, challenging times, and just really interesting that even the staff are being tested the back office staff, if you will, are being tested every 2 days. But yeah, I agree. I might be a bit divisive now, but I'm a diehard Liverpool fan. I go home and away, and I'm devastated to not be in the stadiums. And there was an announcement here in the UK today that has pushed back the plans for October for reduced allocation till into the future, likely to be 2021. So that's really disappointing. And Alex, I think we spoke last week, and you were just traveling up to Manchester for an event. So could you tell us a little bit about what a federation needs to do to actually put on an event like that in a major city like Manchester, especially where there's local restrictions right now?
No, sure, yeah, and as Gene said that word quite a few times, it's that bubble that you've got to try and create. And obviously, you need to get the permission from the government in the first place. You need to get permission from the public health, the local public health, which obviously Manchester were very helpful in that regard. But I think the greater challenge is initially, even when you're trying to put that on, is give sponsors confidence. You've got to get players across. We've got players from Egypt and South America and the States, and that side of it has been just an extraordinary challenge, really, to get them in from abroad and get those permissions. We've done 2 lots of testing in Manchester now, so we're actually it's the last day today, and within the players and within all the staff, every single person has been negative for both lots of tests. So they will be tested again right at the end of this event, and then we're all heading off to Egypt for next week. So again, none of it is straightforward, and just the amount of work in the background is
taking the traveling circus to Egypt next. Then
absolutely, yeah.
It's just there's a challenge in itself as well, taking it to international markets. So yeah, it's a difficult market for sure at the minute, and I know sports got hurt more than most over the last number of months, and obviously we're quite concerned about what the future says, but hopefully digital and some of the things we're going to talk about today can help keep these clubs alive and engaging with fans in the fullness of time while we patiently wait for fans to return to the grounds. All right, well, let's get stuck into the sports panel now then. So we talked about data-driven strategies. So I think maybe sticking with you, Alex, initially, we work together, don't we, on the Squash TV proposition. So I know your business model fairly well, but for the benefit of the audience and our fellow panelists, could you tell us a little bit more about Professional Squash Association's business model? Because I think we all know the well-established federation rights model with broadcasters. Here's our content, rights to our content, give us the check and do what you want with it. But nowadays, fans want access to content and engagement every minute of every day, really. So could you tell us a little bit more about how you've diversified your sort of business model across linear, social, direct to consumer, and so on? And maybe the second part of that question, the trade-off really from the guaranteed check with broadcasters versus maybe data that you collect with direct to consumer.
Sure. No, so I guess our story is a little bit backwards to everyone else's in terms of going right back to the day. I mean, we've had an OTT platform since 2010. And the main reason we had that was because at that time we weren't a great broadcast production, so we couldn't convince broadcasters to take the product. So whilst we were working really hard on that broadcast, we were actually trying to figure out, right, we can convince maybe all of the sort of diehard squash fans to watch it, but not necessarily the broadcasters. So we almost kind of reversed from the OTT platform into the linear TV, where suddenly then, we'd have Astro in Malaysia and BT Sport now take it, and Sky took it for a little while. But we were only able to do that off the back of having the OTT offering. So we're sort of reasonably well versed, I think, in that region. And then bizarrely what happened then, sort of as we built out that proposition and as we kind of built the numbers within the OTT space, we obviously wanted to get more kind of just more sort of distribution and more eyeballs. So that was then when we sort of had the conversations with Eurosport, who were also trying to build up quite aggressively their OTT offering, and we had a really strong presence in Europe. So we were almost able to port our subscriber base into the Eurosport one, and then help them market and bring a lot of squash fans to the Eurosport player. So we've ended up with this kind of, I guess, a slightly weird hybrid of, we've still got our main core of Squash TV, which is kind of the rest of the world, yep. Eurosport within Europe, and then within that, the next part of that kind of journey, then kind of Facebook came into the scene as well as the broadcasters. So we've got this real kind of, I guess it's a little bit fragmented. I think the advantages of going to Eurosport were just we wanted a big broadcaster across Europe that could get us onto linear. So all of the highlights are on the linear channel. Yeah. So that's obviously bringing in kind of new people. And then obviously the great platform within Eurosport Player, and you've got all squash alongside, tennis and cycling and the multitude of sports there. Then when you bring Facebook kind of into the mix, then you're really kind of trying to sort of analyze. You're able to really delve deeper into who's watching it and where are they watching it and how long are they watching it for. So we've been doing that all alongside the kind of almost side by side with Squash TV, really.
Without really getting stuck into the sensitivities of your agreements with those entities, but is a data exchange a part of that? Is Facebook giving you data? I appreciate that what you've described there is to extend your reach, and it's exactly what a federation should do, obviously a tier 2 fed or a mid-tier fed. But with Facebook and Eurosport, do you actually collect much data back and then own that data to engage directly?
With Facebook, yes, and with Eurosport, the traditional kind of broadcaster where they become, it's quite hard to get it out of them. So on paper, we're supposed to get it. No, it's. I think at the start of the relationship, we were doing a lot of marketing for them as well, and there was a lot of back and forth on how many squash fans were actually landing on the platform. More recently, it's kind of a bit more in the broadcaster model where it's just tough. It's just tough to get it out. Whereas Facebook's, it's total transparency, and you're in there diving around with the figures, day in, day out, and really trying to segment things, and how many people are watching over here versus over there, and that side of it is making a real difference for us. We know where to sort of push our kind of advertising dollars, and really try and draw some bigger numbers in. So it's a definite advantage for sure.
Right, that's interesting, and it does sound like quite a mature model, and it's really interesting to see that you've been in OTT for 10 years already. Luke, I will come to you in a minute, don't worry. But Jean, maybe we could touch on that a little bit now. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Inter Miami in general, of course, the history, and also tell us a little bit about the fact that I've read that Inter Miami launched was the first MLS club to have its own OTT streaming proposition with a live league match, which is really, really cool and interesting. And I'll just touch on the fact of the sort of local restrictions and how that plays in the rights model with the MLS and, of course, the US market.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think, we were blessed to be a club that has ownership that understood data very well. And more than anything, was always pushing us to be the best in market, best in brand, and be disruptive. Between David Beckham as one of the owners, who's a global brand in the sports and fashion and world industry, to Marcelo Claure, who's definitely a pioneer in terms of technology and investment, to going down deep into the Miami market with the Jorge and Jose Mas, that are, legends, legendary family here in the market. There was a lot of responsibility when we were thinking about how to roll out. A club of the digital era is completely different than what, Real Madrid had to go through, and, Valencia, for example, had to go through, that has 100 years of history, and, their audiences is skewing towards the 60, 70 years old range, and ours is in the 16 to 34 range. So to us, we needed to be a data club, a data first club in a way, right? So we needed to make sure that we built platforms that allowed us to learn from our audience at the beginning stage. So we were able to have small wins at the initiation of our history in a way. Maybe that was not going to be, successful or I would say effective in the short run in the first year or two, but I was very confident that by year 5, we're going to be able to capitalize on taking this approach of being data driven first. And, we built, I would say, a product that we decided that we wanted to own the data and not lease the data in a way. And the concept behind it is when you have a follower on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, to me, those are vanity metrics. You could have 2 million followers, 6 million followers. It doesn't matter. It is a vanity metric that could help you just show a brand that you have penetration in the marketplace. However, there's very little actionable data that you could, gather from having that affinity that fan has with you. To me, it was more about really learning the psychographics of our users and saying, okay, I'm able to segment information, segment content, make decisions based on data that would allow me to maximize, opportunities for fan engagement, for content creation, and for commercial opportunities with our sponsors.
That's super interesting. I never even thought of that really, that your fan base is a younger demographic. So of course they're all going to be digital native and have certain expectations of you as a sports franchise and how they can engage and consume your content. So maybe just back to that point about the OTT, could you tell us a little bit about your first jump into OTT, how that went for you, and whether it was useful from a data and insights point of view to build out these fan personas you're touching on?
Yeah, before I joined the club, I was chief commercial for Oz Sports, and we built OTT distribution platforms for sport entities. So I came with some background in OTT to begin with, and I would say a lot of knowledge on how rights are attributed and the business of rights that to me needs to be completely redefined and rethought of, because it was built on a model of maybe 30 years ago that really doesn't necessarily ticks all the boxes today. To me, it was an opportunity in a way to take rights that we would normally assign to an over-the-air broadcaster and identify an opportunity to say, okay, if we hold and if we retain this digital rights, whether it is in the local market or globally, what can we do with it? Does that generate revenue? Or let's say, because revenue is not, return on investment is not always about revenue. It might be about growth. It might be about engagement. So the first exercise was identifying, the logistics and the guidelines of the rights, where you have localized rights within, let's say, a radius in your local market. And then there is rights that belong to the league that are outside of that market. And then, it was a matter of really just going into the lab and identifying ways, creative ways to, create a product that you had the rights to stream in your own and operated platforms. And at the same time, create an alternative feed that almost becomes a watching companion in the event that someone is watching our game in Italy via Sky or in the UK via Sky, that we're actually able to show them an alternative angle of the game and bringing data into it in terms of stats, players, information, content that was never served to them because maybe they don't follow the club necessarily, but they have downloaded the app. And it was an opportunity to, in a way, service our audience that was both local and maybe was, again, going to the concept of our audience, it's a lot younger. They don't tend to sit down and watch an appointment viewing on a screen, but rather the game needs to come to wherever they are. And it has proven to be very effective. Between the numbers that we are able to generate in rating over the air with our local partners, and also the numbers that we're able to generate, in terms of our streams, we're definitely putting together a very compelling story to our sponsors. And it's just creating new inventory for us to market.
Interesting. Really good insights there, Jean. Thanks for that. We'll put a pin in fan engagement for now and we'll come back to that. Luke, I'll bring you in now if you're there.
Yeah, I am, and apologies that whenever I've got my video on, the audio is absolutely terrible. So I'm going to switch it on very briefly. You can tell me what it's like, but I may turn it on off again if you can't hear me properly.
No problem. All right. Well, look, I just want to touch on the personalization side. I know, look, Accedo are very well known in the marketplace, being an innovator within OTT. You can provide end-to-end solutions, etc. So you have good exposure to the full sort of the tech stack, if you will. And I wanted to touch on really data from your perspective, how you're helping your clients leverage data to create, I don't know, more tailored and personalized experiences, how that feeds into recommendations, search discovery, these sorts of topics. Could you give us a
Sure. Yeah. So it's a fascinating space to be involved in. I think when I first started working in internet delivered video, which was probably back in the kind of early 2000s, it was very much a question of what content did you have available, and then it was very much an editorial curation process, and it was driven by scheduling and perhaps the perceived value of the program strand. And there was not an awful lot of science behind it from a data perspective. What I think we see now coming into play is, first of all, the technology has advanced to the point where we can make sense of all of this data, demographic data, quality of experience, all of these different metrics that are coming in from a lot of different sources. We're working with a couple of broadcasters in the United States at the moment who are using between them something like 16 different data providers, or rather I should say data analyzers. So they've got their Google Analytics, they've got their Conviva Sodexes, they've got et cetera, et cetera. So there is this enormous amount of information that is coming into them. I think the obvious challenge is then how do you make sense of that, and how do you actually turn that into something that is valuable for your organization, but more particularly is valuable to the user. I think one of the big challenges for organizations is you can have the technology in place, but do you have the strategy to actually, the clear strategy to actually be able to make the best use of that? And I think both Alex and Jean hit on some notes of this. It's, do you want to own your own data? Can you own it? Do you have the ability to take all of the different touch points that your audience, your users, your fans are going to be at, and actually make sense of that in a way to kind of a holistic view across those points? I think what we are trying to do is take as much of the complexity out of using data to create better user experiences. And what I mean by that is there's a collection piece, there's an analysis piece, there's an insight piece, and then there's an implementation piece. And each of those requires or has required different technologies, different people, different skill sets, and kind of trying to put all of that together so that the end user gets something new, something interesting, something sticky, something engaging, something that's going to make them fall back in love with the platform, with the team, with the service that they're on is a big ask. And so where we are working really hard is to try and bring that process together and kind of take as much of the, as much of the complexity, a little bit of the decision making out of there. So can we make recommendations about insights? Can we make recommendations about data based on, this particular set of user journeys? We think that this piece of content would be more interesting to that user. Do you want to try that? Away we go. And so I'm making that sound very simplistic, but I think, particularly if you are a federation, if you're a sports brand, you're not going to have a lot of people on staff, ready to do all of this analysis, make all of these editorial changes. So we need to take some of that overhead out and actually let the data and let the intelligence and the business intelligence kind of drive that. And that's really where we're focused around data at the moment.
Well, that was fantastic. Thanks, Luke. And I think there was a theme there actually between yourself and Jean, which is so what? Yes, there's a lot of data there, but let's use the data that actually matters. So what if you've got a million more Facebook likes than your competition? What are you actually learning about the user? How are you making that a better experience for them? As that's driving essentially monetization in other areas. But you mentioned things about falling in love with the service and so on. I think that really resonates with me. In fact, I recall having a demo at IBC maybe last year or the year before from Accedo, where there was I think it was a VR or an AR experience of maybe the Tour de France, something like that, where they could actually follow the cyclists through the mountains and the scale and everything. It was really, really cool. Could you tell us a little bit more about how Accedo uses data to innovate essentially and create these immersive experiences such as VR and AR, and maybe your view on those as mediums really and how successful they will be, whereas, for example, maybe 3D failed in the past?
Sure. So I remember that demo very well. We're really, really pleased with it. So I think we're in a fascinating time right now when it comes to these kind of enhanced experiences, particularly like augmented reality, because the situation that we're in with C19 is forcing companies all over the all over the landscape to think again about what their content experiences can be. They're being forced to innovate, and it's something that we've heard when we're talking to sports brands, broadcasters, commercial partners, the sponsors. We have empty stadiums. We had no live games for a long period of time. Okay, what content can we create? What experiences can we create that are going to give the fans something to engage with? And augmented reality, I think, is a technology kind of whose time has come as a result of this very unique situation that we find ourselves in. I think the really interesting thing about augmented reality and kind of big data is that there's a really nice kind of circular, virtuous circle there, which is you need lots of data to power a really kick-ass augmented reality experience, but equally, augmented reality is a fantastic way of visualizing big data sets. So if you think about sports, you think about some of the points that Jean was making and Alex too, like all of these different camera angles, all of the different metrics that you're getting from analyzing those camera angles, from the player tracking. These are all lots of different data sets that you can bring into an augmented reality experience where you're not bound by the kind of physical canvas. You can project an augmented reality experience onto any kind of any flat space, any well-lit wall, and so all of a sudden you have a whole different canvas upon which to represent those data sets. So I think the advent of multi-camera broadcasting is a huge plus for augmented reality experiences. The 3D modeling, the way that has kind of come on, and how much more efficient and quick that can be. So actually building a 3D model of a physical object and then projecting that using AR is a lot simpler than it used to be. But then, finally, I think the availability of different data sets, whether that is again from multiple camera angles, whether it's from player tracking, whether it is from social media feeds, you bring all of that together within an AR experience, and you can create some really engaging, really interesting experiences. And I think this is going to be an area that sports really kind of pushes to the next level. I think, again, it's a technology whose kind of time has come because of the situation that we're in now with COVID.
Let's have that conversation again in 5 years, Luke, and let's see how. Right. Look, Alex, I'm going to come to you in a minute around fan personas and what's important to you and how what sort of different fans you have within PSA. But maybe back to you, Jean. Really, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, but we work at NPP, we work with lots of different football clubs. We've worked with the likes of Leeds and Fulham in the past, the Football League itself. Manchester United, Juventus, Barca, etc. So, and they've all got very common problems. You know, these are very well established clubs with global fan bases quite often, but they have very disparate data. They have silos of maybe competition data, hospitality, membership, ticketing, digital OTT, etc. And given that you're a shiny new franchise, for want of a better expression, I'm guessing that you have maybe a better chance of being successful there, and you're starting on better foundations, I guess, ultimately, including your sort of single view of the fan. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely right on point. You know, to us, and again, it was probably the vices of the previous and legacy of the sport is that, you know, people did not bring in tickets in-house. Merchandise was not necessarily brought in-house. It was elements that lived in a way disconnected from the heart of the club. For us, it was extremely relevant to make sure that we housed everything under the same building, and that we were able to utilize those third parties, but really learn from that data. So my approach was, you know, almost generating a data warehouse where we would create almost, if you want to see it on 5 years, 8 years ago technology, a single sign-on, right? Where there was no way that there was going to be a duplicate or, you know, any conflict of I have 6 entries of the same email. And the only way around it was creating this data warehouse and, you know, choosing the right partners. It needs to be like-minded partners that come and help you. And, you know, taking information, let's say, for example, for Wi-Fi in our stadium, and making sure that we recognize this email entry point and associating it with, you know, this other entry point that was maybe from someone that downloaded the app. Is it the same email? Then maybe this is the same person, right? Is it the same zip code? Then yes, it is definitely the same person.
Yeah.
But how do you actually also bring in other APIs like Fanatics and bring merchandise and say, hey, what information can you give me of this email that I have right here? And then Fanatics will come in and give you, you know, well, they have purchased 7 jerseys. They have not purchased, you know, X amount of flags and banners. And you started already building a profile and persona, going to your point with Alex. But the reality was that every single touch point to us was relevant, from who is going to be our partner that would activate our parking in the stadium, who's going to be our food and beverage organization. It needed to be someone that was able to first speak the same language and be able to share the information so that we could actually enhance the user experience and identify cost efficiencies and commercial opportunities. You know, if someone went crazy in the kitchen and, you know, made a mistake and, you know, threw 100 hot dogs, you know, and it was minute 85, maybe it was time to do a hot dog sale. What do? We send a push notification to everyone in the venue that is geofenced inside the venue, and have them, you know, $1 hot dog, because we want to get rid of that inventory, right? So to us, it was really building, like you said, a shiny object, but really that something that would deliver value, whether that was, you know, fan engagement, that was sponsors opportunities, or it was, you know, cost efficiencies, and delivering content through our OTT service was also key.
Very interesting. And we always talk about the holy grail would be, with football clubs in particular, because of the amount of different departments, would be a single identity linked to a single payment account across hospitality, ticketing, merchandise, OTT, digital, etc. And there's not a lot of people in the sports business that have nailed that. I think it's fair to say. In fact, I actually know, I won't expose the entity, but I know a company that actually, a football club that just decided to burn the data when the GDPR review was coming in, and they had to, you know, get opt-ins, etc. And because they said, well, look, we're a club, we're not like a Netflix where people just go where the best content is. We're a club, fans are tribal, they'll come back, we'll get their data in the fullness of time. So it was quite a brave move, but it just, for me, it demonstrated just how difficult a challenge it is to centralize fans across all of these different areas. And Alex, just back to you then, you know, Squash obviously is a, we touched on this, a mid-tier sport. So I think, what sort of segments or types of customers do you have really? And do you feed into ticketing as well? Is that part of your domain? And, how do you sort of market different messages to different audiences, maybe sell tickets to these fans that go to the events, and, maybe engage digital with these fans that are younger and don't typically attend, that sort of thing?
No, sure. I mean, to be honest, with being a smaller sport, that is one of our challenges. So if on the World Tour we'd have, say, 25, 30 events, that would be run by 25 different promoters. They'd all be on different ticketing platforms. They'd all be doing sort of, varying degrees of sort of good or not so good jobs. Within this period of time in COVID, actually part of the strategy that we're pulling together for the next kind of 5 to 10 years is centralizing that and pulling all of those events into almost one kind of commercial entity, and being able to almost kind of own the data across all of the different events, so everyone kind of has a share in it, and obviously then that data becomes much more useful. At the moment, all of the tickets that get sold in Grand Central Station for the Tournament of Champions, it's removed from us. It's not our data, so there's kind of nothing we can do with it, and therefore it's not very useful to the sport or to the tour. So the ones we can affect are obviously the Facebooks and the Squash TV and those elements. So Squash TV being the primary example of that, as you know. And then within our different kind of.
Sorry, Alex, I thought you'd stopped. Continue.
No, it's just then you've obviously again got like you alluded to. Then you've got the juniors or some of the other places where they're not going to events and they're just consuming content on YouTube or Facebook. And how do we kind of bring all of that into the center, as Jean was saying? How do you get it into one kind of place where you can sort of make sense of it? And obviously we're as with any sport, we're on all of these different platforms, and there's various different age groups consuming in different places. We finally launched on TikTok during the summer, and that's obviously going to be a completely different demographic to YouTube and gender. So it's something that's very higher power kind of hit list really, is to sort of pull all of that into one place if we can.
So that would be the end goal really, is have a centralized database with all of the touch points you've just described, and then be able to obviously segment with more accuracy and target with more tailored messaging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And hopefully that would drive, then I presume it would help you, demarcate the youth and try and drive that to increase participation, because obviously as a mid-tier fed, I presume participation's hugely important, not just to performance of the sport, but also to the consumption of the sport as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're very close to kind of World Squash Federation now as well, which obviously is much more of the sort of the federation facing organisation. So we're working pretty closely with them to link up the England squash and US squash and French squash, those sorts of things, trying to get them all kind of on the same page really, and all kind of having a similar sort of mentality across the whole sport.
Herding cats.
A one strategy kind of approach. There's a hell of a lot of conversations and a lot of politics, but we're trying to drive straight through that, and just trying to sort of we're almost trying to get to the point where we become super useful to all of those federations, so that they kind of buy into it, kind of almost helping them do it really. Set those things up.
I appreciate your humility there as well, Alex. Nobody has, the magic sauce now, as it were. Everybody's on a journey, of course. So, but you've highlighted some challenges there. Maybe that's where I'll go to next. Jean, do you want to go first? Luke, you're next. So, what challenges are you facing with, data-driven strategies? Is the data catching up in time with your strategy, or, is the tail wagging the dog, that sort of thing?
Oh, I mean, you would think that if you have the data, you have it all, right? Nah, not really. Data is nothing if there's no effective interpretation. And I think Luke was alluding to this earlier. And I think the biggest challenge that we have is that many times we try to fit our direction into the data that we capture, right? I mean, data would take anything. But if you are, like a business department team wanting to sell a new deal, and you're looking at, go talk to the data guy or go speak to someone in the data department, and they're like, hey, can you give me the latest, reports on analytics? And you find a way to justify whatever point you want if put through the right lens, right? And I think the biggest challenge is really interpreting data effectively, right? It's definitely capturing it. That is extremely relevant. Housing it on the same roof is a must. But then taking that and building, business actions is where I think the biggest challenge is, because, people are used to, well, the strategy is based on the following pillars that the brand wants to take, rather than the strategy is based on the data that we capture, and that's speaking to us in a language that is maybe in contrary to the business, direction that we have taken, right? And I think that is, as an entity, the biggest challenge that one could have. I think marketers, brands, investors are becoming smarter by the minute. And I remember sitting down in boards where, maybe 10, 15 years ago, investment was made, 20% physical activations and, 80% physical activation, 20%, whatever you guys are doing in digital. And nowadays conversations start off with, what are you guys doing in digital? How are you guys catering to your fans? We're not looking only for a brand association, but actually a brand integration that goes above and beyond just a transaction.
Thanks, Sean. Right, we've got about 5 minutes or so to go, maybe 5-10 if we're lucky. Luke, maybe you could touch on the challenges aspect as well across your clients. It's all well and good collecting the data, but as Jean's touched on, it doesn't really matter unless you can actually do something with it. So maybe you could actually answer this from maybe a user experience UI point of view, given your line of work.
Sure. I would pick up on one thing that Jean said that really resonated with me, which is to really make effective use of data, you have to be very clear about what your strategy is, and you have to let the data inform that. I think if you've got little pockets of a business, using data and being data driven, but the rest of the organization, or at least a critical mass of it, isn't invested in that, then it's really going to be difficult to generate as much value from that data as for that particular pocket. That being said, I think again, the challenge that we are really looking to help with is this interpretation and this analysis piece. The majority, a lot of the customers that we work with do not have multi-person data insight teams. They don't have big data analysis teams. They would like them, but these are valuable skill sets. These are valuable resources. So they need to use technology to help them with that. Ultimately, even people with large data departments do as well. And so the way that we're looking at it is that if we can build software that takes that data, applies a level of analysis to it according to whatever filters are important to your business, and then delivers you actionable insights that can then be executed through a user interface, through a CMS system, then that's going to be really helpful, because it means that you, the producer, the editor, the marketing head, or whatever, can say, okay, I can see that for a large proportion of my audience, of my fans, they're trying to take a user journey to get to this piece of content. It's taking them 3 clicks. We could do it in 1. Or there's a whole group over here that are not being super served with the right content, and we can tell that because the engagement is lousy. So actually, we need to serve that demographic with different content. Making that, those insights sound very straightforward when you kind of wheel them out as examples like this. But for a lot of people, who are not necessarily trained for that interpretation, that information, those insights need to be presented to them in a way that helps them make that go on that journey. So again, it's it's connecting that data with the insights, and then it's providing that level of interpretation in a way that means you don't have to be a data scientist to understand it. And for us, that's a key challenge, because good data scientists are pretty few and far between still.
No, there's some really, really good points raised there, Luke. I think that's absolutely key. Actually, if you can apply AI to the data and actually help form some of the analysis and take away that huge resource strain on building out data teams, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. All right, well, look, we are running out of time, so I guess I'm going to ask you all the same question to give me your take on it, really. And I guess from your perspective, Alex and John, I'd like it to be related to your business. Luke, I guess, against your clients. But where can data have the biggest impact for sports brands? For your brand, shall we say, John, where can data have the biggest impact for Inter Miami in the next number of years?
I mean, multiple years ago, content was king. And it was for many, many years.
Delivery's queen, apparently.
Yeah. After that, the platform was the king. So those that owned the platform were like, you know what, I'm going to sell, a 3 instrument MIDI tone, and because I am Sprint or AT&T, I'm going to make money. And I think now data is king, and it will stay that way for a very, very long time until people really are able to master it. I think the benefits and the biggest impact you're going to have are, twofold. One is in terms of user engagement. I think if you're able to really take to the next level the analysis and interpretation of the data, you will be able to generate content that is fully and completely targeted, and that's always going to nail nail it in the head with fans. And that results into the next big impact, which is commercial value. As entities, we're always looking for new inventory. I think data is just generating new commercial franchises that allow for sponsors to take advantage of that fan engagement. I think it's one of those things that can't live without. It is all in, the fan engagement, but the reason behind it is not only to inform and entertain, but also to serve some of the sponsors and partners that we have.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean. And Alex, I guess you've touched on this a little bit earlier about your sort of 5 to 10 year strategy, but how can data really have the biggest impact for PSA and Squash TV?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo some of the things that John said there in terms of, I think, and in fact, both John and Luke have said this previously, but the personalization one is the really interesting one for us, I think. And then obviously then having the tech to be able to do that. Does somebody want to watch the 3-minute highlights of a match? Do they want to watch the 10-minute highlights? Do they want to watch the whole match? I think where we've maybe fallen down before is just that we're not able to necessarily target those people with those things. So literally just, you just chuck in everything at every platform. And that's not necessarily working. When we've done some we've not necessarily just looked at the data, but when we've done some conversations which we've had at tournaments, it's quite interesting that some of the juniors, and they consume a hell of a lot of squash. So this isn't data that we would have got off the background data. This is just actually sort of talking to the kids and stuff. They don't watch a live match. It's too long. They'll happily watch the 8 or 9 minute piece on YouTube that's free. So it's how do we sort of then deliver all of those things to the audience that they want.
That's really interesting. That's a real cultural shift, isn't it, really, of how your fans are consuming the content that you're serving. Excuse the pun. Look, I guess over to you now, really. How do you see data having the biggest positive impact that is on your clients in the future?
I think it's kind of echoing everything that Jean and Alex have said, but it's delivering the right piece of content at the right time to to the right fan on the right device. And I remember when a report came out into football, I think by Copa-19 a few years ago, and again, echoing what Alex has said, learning that a certain demographic watch a series of collated, curated clips of a match in a private chat window. They don't, or a private messaging client, they don't sit down in the living room, they don't go to a pub, they don't watch that whole thing. So how do you ensure that you get the right content format, the right moments to that audience where they want it? And that has to come from data. So I think the ability for federations, for clubs, etc., to expand their fan base, which I think ultimately is a it's an existential requirement for them, is going to come from gathering that data and then using it to kind of super serve those different types of fan where they want to be served.
Oh, I think you just went on mute. But no, thank you, Luke. There's some really, really good points. I think I've written down a couple of key takeaways, or snippets, if you will. So we've heard it from John, data is king. I think that's a really interesting take. And we've all heard the content and delivery is king messages before. So data is king, and it's going to be center of everything what you do in the future. Alex has told us about the cultural shift with younger audiences and how they consume content, and their vision to sort of leverage all of these data and touch points and centralize that to create better segments so they can target with more intelligence. And Luke has touched on the fact that it's all well and good collecting this data. One of the biggest challenges is really how you create insights off that data, how you interpret the data to create actionable insights. So really, really good discussion today. I had about 30 more questions that we could have got through today, but we run out of time, unfortunately. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, or my guests, if you will, for joining us today. It was a great discussion. And for the audience